Welcome back to the Second Supper, friends. My name is Gigi, for those of you that do not know me, and I am the host of this podcast. What a very special episode to record today. I am so excited and grateful to just be sitting here and sharing my testimony with you guys. God has truly done just such a work in my life. And I will be, quite honest. I truthfully was so nervous for a really long time to share my testimony because I genuinely thought that it was quote unquote too boring, in comparison to some of the testimonies that people in my life have shared with me. But I was just reminded that, sharing my story has nothing to do with me, but it has everything to do with Jesus and, how he saved me from the darkest place of my life. And so all of the glory goes to him at the end of the day. This is just me being vulnerable and sharing in a space my life and how God has truly, worked in that way. And so don't let anybody or anything, especially the enemy, tell you that your story's too boring or it's not deep enough or, whatever the case may be, whatever is filling up your brain and your mind, your story holds weight and it holds the glory of God's name at the end of the day. And before we kick things off, if you are watching this video, I am dog sitting and both of the dogs are running around the apartment. And so if that is what you see, they just wanted to be a guest on the podcast. But either way, let's get into it. I will start off just by saying that I was not raised in a Christian household. My family was Catholic, but I would say not a religious Catholic. I knew who God was because growing up with my grandma, she was always praying around me, but it just wasn't practiced in my household, right? So I knew that there was a God, but I didn't understand truly like what that meant. And so when I was 12 years old, I started going to a Christian church with some friends, but to be fully transparent, it never felt like I was there to be with God or to have a relationship with God just because, it had nothing to do with the church. They did a great job with that. But I just remember my memories were more so about, being there and having fun with all of my friends. And so, it was just always such a great time. And it always just felt like home, like I even went on Sunday mornings and the services were spoken in Spanish with no translator. And the amount of Spanish that I know is un poquito. So if that tells you anything about how much it felt like home, that I just wanted to be in the presence of that place, I hope that that can kind of give you a little bit of an understanding. And so, anyways, while I was going to that church, we ended up all going to like this conference, and it was up in Orlando. And my parents let me go because I was really close with the family who I had been going to church with. And when I was at that conference, I had experienced church trauma. And some people get church hurt, some others get church trauma. They can definitely coincide with one another. But on my end, it was definitely just a traumatic experience. And I will also preface just by saying that I was 12 years old and I just had no idea what was going on around me. No one spoke to me before, no one spoke to me after. I truly was just kind of like in the dark about it. And so, if that had happened to me now in my life, I wouldn't have been affected or I would not be affected the way that I was then. And all I remember is these people were all around me. Like we were up, the worship band was playing, we were dancing, jumping around, singing, like just all of the kids, we were having such a great time. It was all the kids at the front. And then out of nowhere, all I remember, like just super suddenly, was people falling to the ground left and right. It was like boom, 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 like one after the other. And I thought like people were tripping or felt like I didn't know what was going on. But then they started like, I don't know, it was just a lot for me when I was that age. And then this woman, she walks up to me and she places her hand like over my head and she starts yelling in my ear. And to be honest, like I do not remember what it was that she was saying to me. I just remember it being really scary for me like at that time. And again, 12 years old, didn't really know who God was, didn't understand what was going on, No one explained anything to me. There was no like, hey, fair warning. Like, there was just none of that. And so when I got home from that conference, I legitimately was just traumatized and so scarred from it that I literally never stepped foot back into a church ever again up until 3 years ago. And that is where the real story begins. I was in a long term relationship for 5 years with a person that I genuinely thought I was going to marry. The relationship was great, until it wasn't. And by no means is that a way for me to bash the person that I was with. He is not a bad person. He's just not my person at the end of the day. And I was definitely wrong many times in many situations by things I said, how I acted, and praise God, like glory be to God that He transformed my life and stripped me away from the toxicity and the insecurities that I once carried. And He's still doing a work in me. Like, I am far from perfect. There's a lot more that God still reveals to me every day and surprises me sometimes, but He's just such a good God that He will continue working on us. Um, our stories are never finished, right? And so, anyways, overall, the relationship, we just disagreed on a lot of things. One of them happened to be faith, toward the end of the relationship when I started to, understand who God was and was introduced to God. So that was one thing that was really big for me toward the end of the relationship. We were living in sin, very clearly, to be put. My anxiety was at an all time high. I have struggled with anxiety my entire life, even as a little girl, not knowing what anxiety was, but as I got older, truly understanding the symptoms of what that looks like. I developed toward the end of the relationship, I would say like the last year of the relationship, I developed like crippling depression. I had gained about 65 pounds and I really was just lost, like I didn't even know who Gianna was. I didn't know what I liked to do. I was lost overall in every aspect of my life. And as sad as it sounds, I legitimately hated the person who was staring back at me when I would look in the mirror. Um, and that's just me being really vulnerable, like it's sad to say out loud, but that's genuinely what I felt. And in March of 2023, I remember driving in my car and I was just feeling like this overwhelming amount of sadness, but also like this desire to know who God was. And I had no one in my life. Like when I tell you I had no one in my life who was speaking to me about God, trying to influence me in any way, shape, or form. Like I just remember saying to myself as I was driving in the car, like, I don't know how to find him, and I'm way too embarrassed to walk into a church. And I also had no friends, living in this new state, working remotely from home. And again, my ex wasn't Christian, and so I really just didn't know what to do. And so that feeling kind of lingered for a few months. And then as those few months went by, like around June, I ended up meeting my now one of my best friends, Lana, who was truly just an angel sent from heaven because, without her sharing her testimony to me and being so kind and so welcoming to my questions, I wouldn't be where I am today. Number one, her testimony is absolutely insane. I can't wait to have her on the podcast so that she can just show like how much God has worked in her life. Like it's absolutely incredible, but also like how welcoming she was and she just wasn't judgmental. Everything I thought that a Christian was, she wasn't. Like she was just so relatable in every way. And anyways, I just love you so much, Lana. You are such an important piece of my life and I'm just so grateful for you. But anyways, she invited me to her church, which ironically was like walking distance from my house. I wouldn't walk there, but it was walking distance from my house. She introduced me to these amazing women who just spoke life into me, who really pushed me through a season that I did not know how to get out of. And now in my life, I know that number one, I can lean on God. I know that He can get me out of anything. He can do anything. Like He's a miracle worker. He is the Prince of Peace. Like I know all that now, but back then, I didn't know any of those things. I didn't understand the power of God. I didn't understand the power of prayer. And so these women in my life and Lana, they got me through a season that I didn't know how to get out of. And at this point in my life, like I said, I had not given my life to Christ yet, but I was just a little bit curious. I wanted to know more. about what life with Jesus looked like, or honestly, like what that sentence even meant. And so over those next few months, those next, I would say maybe like 6 months, I was going to church every Sunday, whether I was in the building with Lana or whether I was watching it live stream at home. I was watching or there every single Sunday. I was going to life groups every single week. There was like two different ones that I was going to. One of them was a women's group, and then another one was kind of like a co-ed group, and then you would break out into different like little mini groups that you would like, just like talk about and vent and all of the things. It was so great. Um and then I started to read a Bible that was so generously gifted to me. And I will say, like, in the midst of all of that, my relationship was literally crumbling into pieces at this point. And my anxiety, my depression, my stress levels were so bad that I ended up going to the hospital because my body was essentially like producing signs of a heart attack. And long story short, praise God, I did not have a heart attack. But I was very close to one, and the doctor in the ER basically told me, like, you need to take a medical leave of absence from work and you need a sabbatical because whatever you're going through, you are going to give yourself a heart attack. And so after that scare, I started to really take my journey with God seriously. And again, at that time, I would say I was taking my journey with God seriously. But if I look back now, I can say like it was serious for the season I was in, but I wouldn't say that it was serious for where I'm at now, if that makes sense. And so on that, day, I made the commitment to give my life to Christ and that I would live my life for Him at that moment. And boy, oh boy, that is when tables started to flip and when truly started to be stripped away from everything. And I would say that the very first thing that God delivered me from and stripped me away of was my anxiety and my depression. Like, I do not remember the last time that I had a panic attack or an anxiety attack that kept me up all night long and, quite frankly, like left me in a space that I could barely catch my own breath. Like, when I tell you that my anxiety got so bad that I would literally be hyperventilating and sitting there like overwhelmed about the unknown of life and what happens after death and what happens a year from now and will this be and the what if and the what if and the what if. And I haven't felt that literally since I laid it down to God. And yes, I still have anxious thoughts, but not in a way that will ever control me to where I can't breathe and where I can't process my thoughts for myself. The next thing that God delivered me from and stripped me from was a relationship that I truly thought was everything that I ever wanted, but God so generously showed me that actually it was nothing of what I had needed. Um, and I will tell you that this was the hardest thing for sure because, again, I thought I was going to marry this man, right? Like, I had a ring on my finger. We owned two houses together. It was just not a small feat. I genuinely thought that my life was going to be with him for the rest of my life. Um, Even through the hardship, even through the pain, even through the crying, even through feeling not good enough, even through all of the pain that I was experiencing, I had hope and I was living for this person that I was like, he's telling me all the things, even though his actions aren't lining up, he's telling me what I want to hear, right? And so, you know, God, but God, he stepped in and very long story long, I prayed very specifically for the very first time in my life ever. And I prayed to God and I asked him, Lord, please show me a sign. If this is not the relationship that I am supposed to be in, please, please show me a sign and I will leave, Lord. I will follow you. I will do what you say. I will do what you ask. And friends, let me tell you, be very, very careful what you pray for because a few hours later, after I prayed that prayer, I was sitting in my office, I was blasting worship music, and I hear like this loud bang, and I'm like freaking out. I'm home alone by myself. I go running outside, and I see a bird laying on my pool deck who is dead. And now, again, I will repeat, I was very lukewarm in my faith at this point. And I'm also a huge animal lover, animal advocate. And I will be honest and say, like, I literally forgot that I had prayed that prayer just a few hours ago. And I was so focused on like disposing of this bird and how do I do that? Like, this has never happened to me before and all the things. And so I dispose of this bird. I go about my day. Um, and then a week later, I am on a run and I take a wrong turn. I had been going on runs and I had been doing the same exact, like course, like the entire time. Every single time I would run, I would go the same exact way. And I take a wrong turn. I go a different way this time. And as I'm running, I pass by another dead bird on the sidewalk. And again, I was like, oh, that's so sad. Like like a dead bird. Like what? Right over my head. Another week goes by. And I come back home from running errands and I go to let my dog outside to go to the restroom. And I kid you not, another dead bird was laying on my pool deck. And I know it's morbid, but when I tell you that God will use anything to get your attention, he will use anything. And I will say, like, I didn't pray that prayer once. I was actively praying that prayer, but I think just because I just didn't know how powerful God was, I had no knowledge of these miracles that he had performed in the Bible because I was not up to speed. Um, and I was just naive, like I was like, come on, like that's a coincidence. Like I believed in coincidences at that time. Now I no longer do, but like, anyway, absolutely crazy. So in that moment, when I saw the third dead bird, I was like, I need to call Lana. I need to get counsel from somebody who's been doing this for a long time. She's married. She can give me advice kind of like in multiple areas. Like, let me just seek wise counsel. And so I called her, and her advice was to pray on it. And she also told me, like, her and her husband, they were like, oh, well, when things come in threes, like, it's significant, right? And so I had kind of just been like pondering that thought throughout that week. And I finally prayed on it. And it's kind of crazy when I look back, like, everything was in a 1 week increment and it was just spaced out like week after week. And so I prayed on it. And right before I ate my dinner, a week later, I said, Lord, I'm not trying to tell you that I don't have faith. I'm not trying to tell you that I don't believe that this is you talking to me, but you know that I'm really, really new at this. And I just need one more sign. And I know that y'all are judging me right now, like, girl, he sent you all these signs. How can you possibly be asking for another sign? Well, because I was lukewarm and I didn't know what I know today. And so I prayed, I asked for one more sign, and I went to sleep. And the next morning, I woke up, and y'all, there was a dead bird floating in my pool. And I will tell you that we lived in that house for over a year and never have we ever seen a dead bird, let alone any flying into windows or floating in the pool, dead or alive. And so there I had it, right? You're probably like, okay, what did you do? Like, he showed you four signs. What did you do? What happened? Well, again, don't judge me. This is a safe space. I was a naive girl. I was living in the world who just loved love so bad. And I truly thought that I could fix the relationship. And I said, how could God want me to leave after all these years, after, putting in all this work, after being engaged, after like all these things? Like, God, am I am I reading the signs wrong? And I started to really think like, maybe he's not telling me that. Maybe he's telling me this. And again, like I was in denial. I was trying to fix a relationship. I didn't want to leave. So I was trying to make up any excuse that I possibly could. And God is probably up there shaking his head like, how many birds do you want me to kill? Like, what is going on? And so I gave it one more try. And I just said, I have a trip coming up in a few days. I'm not going to cancel the trip. Let me go on the trip. Let us do this. Because I also was going to therapy, like religiously as well. And I just learned a lot about myself. And she recommended, why don't you write your non-negotiables down? Have him write his non-negotiables down. Give it to one another and really sit there and think about it. Like, can you provide these things to one another? And so that's what I recommended. He was a-okay with it. We had a conversation before we left about the non-negotiables, and basically it was like, I just don't really agree what you have on this piece of paper. And to be frank, like, again, not me bashing like him in any way, but it was like things of like, I just want to go on a date night once a week, and that was not agreed upon. Like, there was just a lot of things on there that to me now I know that those are things that I will receive so organically, by my future husband. But anyways, we wrote these non-negotiables down on a piece of paper. And while I was away, I was praying my butt off, y'all. I was begging God to fix this man's heart, to have him love me the way that I needed to be loved. And I realized on the very last day, right before I came home, that I was praying and I was asking God to literally change somebody. And that's not fair. It's not fair to ask God to do that. And it's not fair to ask somebody to do that. And so I changed my prayer. And all I said was, Lord, if you want me to be in this relationship, I know, guys, stop judging me. I can feel the judgment through the screen and through the microphone. Like, I know, I get it. But, anyways, this is my story. Let me tell it. And so I just said, Lord, if you want me to be in this relationship, let there just be like a 0.01% chance that he's willing to make it work. Like, even if he's just like, I don't know how, but I'm willing type of thing, then I'll stay. But if you really don't want me to be in this relationship, if the birds were you talking to me, if all of this is like real and this is really you, then let everything that comes out of his mouth make no sense to me. And also let me just hear the same exact thing that he said before, that he essentially just wasn't willing to do the things that I needed to feel like loved and appreciated in this relationship to make it work long term. And when I got back, that is essentially exactly what happened. Um, it all sounded exactly the same, but it also made no sense at all. Like, I swear to you on everything, it was one of the most craziest experiences in like a 10-minute conversation that was going back and forth. And for the very first time in every conversation I had, in every moment throughout up until this moment, it was the very first time that I felt peace, and I knew that like God really gave me my answer. And so I called my best friend Rond, and that day she booked a flight. 3 days later, she was in Texas, and we drove halfway across the country back home to Florida. And I will tell you that, when I got back, I was lost for a little while. I was trying to find my way, especially not having a church, not having a life group, feeling like I took 20 steps back, like I was, again, I had my own house. I had like all these things, right? That like society and culture tells us that like, oh, you're successful if you have these things. And, I went from that to living on my friend's couch at 28. And transparently, like I fell back into sin. And all sin is the same. I could easily say, well, oh, it wasn't that bad. But like, no, all sin is equal in God's eyes. And so it was bad. I fell back into sin. And again, you're probably like, how could you fall back into sin after God showed up for you the way that he did, after he delivered you from anxiety and depression and this toxic relationship and like all of these things? How could you do that? And well, because as much as I was saying that I had given my life to Jesus, I wasn't living my life for Jesus. And that's when things really start to change in your life. And when your perspective really starts to shift, is when you do want to live your life for Jesus instead of just saying, I'm going to do this. Like, it's the action that speaks louder than the words. And that is what I was fighting for in my relationship, was for the actions to align with the words. And it's that same epiphany. Like, I was telling Jesus one thing, but I was acting a different way. And so a couple of weeks into living back home in South Florida, my other best friend, Angelique, ended up inviting me to Rally, which, guys, it's a young adults movement. It's in Fort Lauderdale. If you've never heard of it before, it literally will change your life. It changed my life. And I know so many people whose lives have changed just by being there. It's essentially a young adults movement for people from the ages of 18 to 30. And I can tell you truthfully that my life on that day has truly never looked the same. Never looked the same. Christine Kane was preaching that night, and I promise you, like, every single word that she spoke, I truly believe was scripted, like, by the Holy Spirit to have me hear. Like, everything that she said aligned with everything that I was asking God. Even the pastor's prayer was everything that I needed to hear. Like, I remember like asking myself even before I went, like, why do I have this peace? Like, I feel guilty for the peace that I have. Why am I not as sad? Why am I here though, God? Like, why am I no longer engaged? What is my life? Am I always going to be alone? Am I ever going to have kids? Like, all of these things that I was feeling and asking myself, everything was answered in the sermon and in the prayer. And I couldn't tell you that It felt like God was speaking to me directly, and I was the only person in the room. And I can tell you that I made the best decision that I ever could have made in my life that night. And I had already given my life to Christ, but on that night, I made the decision to fully 100% wholeheartedly devote my life to Christ, keep him at the center of my life, and to be bold in my faith, no matter who was looking, and for whoever who was listening, it didn't matter. And from that day forward, that's exactly what I've been doing. Have I fallen short? Yes, of course. Do I mess up? Am I perfect? No. But that's life, and that it's about the journey, right? It's how you get there at the end of the day. And so that naive girl that I mentioned earlier, well, he revealed to her what true love really looks like, and it's the love of Jesus Christ. That love is something that nobody could ever even come close to. He whispered to me that somebody will love me the way that he designed me to be loved, that he will cherish me in the way that he cherishes me. He whispered to me that anxiety and depression have no authority over me, and he set me free and delivered me from all of it. I am a walking testament that generational chains break when Jesus steps into the picture and when you allow him to step into your picture. That all things, and when I mean it, all things are possible with God. He performed miracles then, and he is still performing miracles today because he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I am now living, first of all, in peace, and I am living in freedom, but I am living in the apartment of my dreams that he so generously blessed me with, a job that allows me to financially support myself and live in this beautiful apartment. I am free from anxiety, I am free from depression, and the list goes on. All of this, number one, all of this has nothing to do with me at all. Me sharing this testimony is to be encouragement to you and to show you how good God is and to show you how much he will pursue you in your whole entire life. He is such a good God. But all of this to say, guys, is that I am set free and that you can be set free too. I pray, pray, pray so deeply that Jesus spoke to you at some point during this episode and at some point in my testimony and my story. I pray that it would be an encouragement to you to give your life to Jesus if you haven't done that already, or to take that next step in your faith, wherever you are in your life and in your journey with Jesus. I promise you that Jesus is with you and he is pursuing you. He has his hand over your life, even when you don't feel it, even when you can't see it. He is always there. Like, I cannot explain to you the amount of times that I look back and I'm like, there's no way that I am supposed to be here at all. And I just look back and I am so grateful to God. And I just thank him that he had his hand over my life. And because of his grace and because of his mercy, I am still here today. You are breathing. I am breathing, and we are alive and awake today, breathing because God is not done with us yet. And a verse that I would love to leave you with is Romans 10:9. And it says, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe it in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. If you want Jesus to be the center of your life, starting today, that's all you have to do. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord of your life. Believe it in your heart that he died on the cross for your sins and my sins, and he was raised 3 days later from the dead, that he conquered death, that he conquered hell, and that he conquered the grave. He is such a wonderful God of free will, and he will never knock on the door to be let in. He will just patiently wait on the porch for you to open the door and to invite him into your life and invite him into your home, to invade your space. And today can be the day that you open up the door and you let him in. Um, I love you guys so much. Jesus loves you. And I'm just so grateful that I have this space that I can share my testimony, I can be vulnerable, and I can hopefully encourage somebody else on the other side of the screen. Remember that your testimony is important. A testimony changed my life. If Lana never told me about her testimony, I don't know if I would be where I am today. And I truthfully believe that she was sent so specifically by God, and He orchestrated that moment in my life so that I can be where I am today. Um, I love y'all. Just remember that your seat is always saved at this table. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you on the next one.